Hi everyone. Okay, I have had endless trouble with this printer. I've hardly used it for 5 hours and stored it for a year. And anyways, long story short, I have had nozzle problems big time. Basically, if the head is hot at around 200, and you just pop this spring, or you just take a piece of filament, you should be able to push it through and it should flow freely. And mine was very intermittent. So basically the hot end is still in here. I've basically removed this from the top. Alright, these pretty much just, you push them in to pull it out. Anyways, I'll cover that in another video. So my nozzle, I just used a little blowtorch and heated it up, and it's pretty much, I melted everything out of it. It's clean. I did this 5 times because everyone just cleans their nozzles, and I was still having problems, and I'm going to show you what I did to deal with this. So firstly, if you unscrew the nozzle from the bottom of the printer head, I'm going to see if I can get you in there. Is very difficult, but that is the hole that it threads into, right? When I removed my nozzle, what I saw in this little area over here is that I had a lot of the filament that had bunched up in there, and it actually had an offset hole. The hole wasn't centered to the threads, which meant that every time it tried to push through the nozzle, it was kind of overlapping. And so what I had to do was I completely removed my PTFE tube, or whatever this thing's called, and then I started heating the end. And when it got to about 150 degrees, that big hunk of plastic that was in there wasn't completely melted, but it was loose enough that I could literally push it out from this end through the top, like so. And that very piece, I'm not even sure where it is now, but my filament was coming out looking like this, and just problem after problem. So the first thing you need to make sure is that you can pass your tubing straight through, like so. If this is not passing through freely, then you have a problem in there like I had. So it's not just your nozzle that can get blocked. I've just found out this whole thing. So basically what I've done now is I've cleaned this, as mentioned. I've made sure that this is cleared out, and I'm now going to set the printer back up and heat it up, and just hope that I get a good amount of flow. Because what I also did notice is when I pass just filament through, this is obviously cold. It wasn't free like this. It was very hard to push this through. Now bear in mind there's no nozzle, obviously. Everything's disconnected. And what had happened is the old filament had gone and basically left the hole exactly as thick as the filament, because I was able to push it through by hand, but it was very difficult and it was really bitey. So if the filament is also not completely loose like this, then what you've got is my problem, where the PLA has gone and molded its own hole, probably off center, and it's just jammed up that whole section. So I'm gonna get this all together and I'll be with you in a second. Alright, I also forgot to add something, that your filament needs to sit directly on the back of this nozzle, and the problem that I had is that it was obviously stopping short, and what ended up happening is that that gap over there filled up with melted filament, which then cooled and just created a real mess. And so what you want to make sure is that when you feed this through, I've now screwed this upper section on. When you feed this through, now this you're going to have to depress this white collar to be able to move this back out. But in terms of pushing it through, you can see I'm going to keep going until I can just see it coming out of the threads over here. There you go. And I'm going to leave it over there, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my nozzle and screw it in, and I'm just going to make sure that that tube is pushed all the way to the back of the nozzle for a perfect seal at the back here, and then the filament can't bunch up at the back of this, because that's where the problem comes in. Another issue that I seem to run into is that when you've ended up with a mess like I have, you might have PLA in the threads, and it's actually very hard to clean out. I'm not sure what the die size is, but obviously it's sometimes easier to remove the PLA when it's cold and hard, but when it's stuck in threads, it's actually very difficult. So my nozzle is actually just going in so far, and it's getting really tight. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to heat this, and as the temperature goes up, I'm going to see if it gets easier to turn, and then at least I know that you know, I have PLA in the threads, and hopefully it's not going to create much of an issue. And as suspected, after it heated up, the nozzle screwed in perfectly, which tells me I just still have a tiny piece of PLA in there. I hope it's not enough to do damage, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the tubing in from the back and just make sure that it goes all the way through, and I'm just going to test with a loose piece of PLA and see how it goes. Okay, so it looks like I have a pretty straight piece of PLA coming out. I've noticed if you, what I do is everything's connected now. When you depress this spring, you can pretty much manually feed the PLA through, and if you push too hard, it curls at the end, and it might give you a false negative that you have a clogged nozzle, but if you just go gentle, you should get a straight one. So I'm going to just quickly try a test print and see if my problem's finally solved. Well, it looks like my problem's been solved. I would not get any extrusion when it runs up and down the side to just get the nozzle ready for printing, and it looks like it's already printing the base pretty well. Previously I would just get terrible adhesion, I'd get breaks and half the print not working. It's hard to see, I'm just doing a small test print, but it looks for now it's working. So just to recap, if the tip of the pen is my nozzle and this is the white tube, if you have a gap in there, the filament's going to bunch up in there, it's going to make a molten little pool, and then you're going to continuously be sticking the filament through that molten pool, and then when it cools, you're going to have a filament size hole in a big round off-centered mess. And what you need to do is remove the nozzle, and you need to heat up the head, and you need to pull the tube out, and you need to stick the tube in from the bottom and take that whole little round bunch of muck and push it out the top and clean it out. And so anyways, hope that helps you guys, and yeah, I'm so glad I'm over with this nonsense.